Hey everybody, it's Amy Walsh here from the Bureau of Tactical Imagination. And I'm here to tell you a little story about my life and what it taught me about how to be an epiphany machine and creative beast in my own business and yours, and how you can be too, okay? So when I was about 25 years old, ancient history, it was probably 1995. I was a completely poor, struggling visual artist working in coffee shops, slowly amassing tips and saving my money so that I could eventually rent an artist studio, and so that I could eventually rent a bigger artist studio and invite other artists in, so that I could eventually have community around my artwork, and I could eventually start exhibiting my work and things like this. I was just out of undergrad a couple years before. I was back in my hometown of Boston, Massachusetts. I didn't know that many people, and I longed for community. I longed for the kind of creative community I had in college. And I was working so hard at so many different little side jobs and not getting traction and just feeling totally stuck. So one weekend I went to a weekend workshop of an organization that I was a part of during those years called No Limits for Women in the Arts. No Limits for Women in the Arts was an incredible national support network for women artists. Very political, very alive, very feminist, incredible. And it was full of mentors for me. I was the youngest person in the organization. I was given a lot of leadership opportunities there. I did a lot of leading around the country in that organization as a young leader. And I showed up at this one workshop, of my peers and my mentors and really my people, so frustrated with my life. Like, I knew that what I needed to do was slowly build resource so that I could make a transformation and start living the life I wanted. And so, I went to this workshop with this in mind, like, what do I need to work on, emotionally, mentally, so that I can just make this choice to stay the course over the next several years, and maybe in 5 years I will have what I need to really go for it as an artist. And I was pretty frustrated, pretty discouraged at that point, I would say. And it turns out one of the topics of the workshop was the ways that we as women and girls internalize messages about our own minds and our own creativity that hold us back. All the places where we put other people's thinking first, where we doubt ourselves, where we don't trust ourselves, where we take care of other people. It's like the ways that we collectively have been raised to think of ourselves as the people who support the visionaries of the society, like not the visionaries themselves. And people have all different versions of this, and it's compounded by race and class and gender and all kinds of things, right? But I worked on that like crazy. I mean, I cried my eyes out all weekend about the places where I just don't trust my thinking. And the women around me continually had me back up and would ask me my biggest vision and my biggest vision for my life, 20 years in the future, 10 years in the future, and my biggest vision for my life at that moment. And I kept hitting this wall of like, I've got to prepare for 3 or 4 or 5 more years and keep saving my tips at the coffee shop, And they would continually say, or maybe there's another solution. Or, I don't know, what else could you do? And I was able to finally face my terror and my insecurity about my own mind and my own ability to figure things out enough that at some point I stepped way back and I thought about the situation like an artist. Like, here are my raw materials, not much financial resource, a need for support and community, a need for time and space to create, a desire for community amongst people in my own age group, and a desire to create resource. I could see the needs, not just in my own life, but in the larger culture around me. Young artists need a place to develop their work once they're outside of school. Creative development can't just stop once they're outside of school or if they never go to school. For college, I mean. So I looked at all the needs in the community around me. I looked at the needs in my own life. I looked at the resources that were available, which seemed like nothing, which wasn't true. And I came home, and I was walking down the street. I still didn't know what I was going to do. And there's a building near my house that was empty, in kind of a parking lot full of industrial buildings. And I just walked into that compound, and I found the owner of the company that owned it all. She happened to be there that day. And I walked into her office, and I designed a proposal for her on the spot once I saw she was interested. When I walked into the office, I found out the building was available. I found out how much it cost per month for rent. And my brain just completely opened up. Like, I picture like a funnel opening on the top of my brain, information pouring in. I had cleared enough space emotionally. It opened up enough possibility that there was a different solution, that it kind of came to me as an epiphany as I was sitting there in front of this woman. And I was insecure. I was so much younger than her. I felt like a fraud, all the things, imposter complex. And I just said, I have a long-standing vision to build a community art center run by a collective of young adult artists, to create a support system for a community that doesn't have it. We're going to serve the neighborhood. We're going to have educational programs. We're going to have, a dark room and a printmaking room and studio spaces for all the artists. All the artists will pay rent on their spaces. That'll pay rent for the building. And it's going to be beautiful. This is what I want to do. And she said, how much startup capital do you have? And I said, well, I've got about $40 in my pocket of saved up tips from Panini, the coffee shop down the street where I work. But everybody's rent that we're going to start paying on the very first day is going to pay for the total rent for the building. And I did the math right there on the spot. I need, 18 of these studios rented. I'll build the walls myself. I need basic carpentry. I'll build out the space. I'll do it all. If you let me in there for a couple months first for free to build the place out, you'll have excellent tenants for the long term. She looked a bit appalled and like I was crazy and she'd never consider something like this. And then she softened and she said, I had a dream of being an artist almost all my life. And until my husband died, who owned this complex in that building, a few years ago, it never occurred to me that I could actually do it. And now that he's gone, as much as I miss him, it's occurring to me that this is my life and I can do what I want to. And after that, we had several more meetings and a collaboration was born. And within 3 months of going to that No Limits workshop, I had pulled together a collective of 23 young adult artists, and we founded the Washington Street Art Center, which is still there now. It's been going for 21 years. I was the director for 6 years, and it completely changed my life and the life of many, many, many other artists. And it was the first time I noticed that there was a real difference between what I could figure out and create when my creative, risk-taking, divergent, flexible, paradigm-shifting brain was turned on, like when I could stand back and see outside of the norm and the paradigm and the sort of like conditions that I was in and really shift it. And what happens when my brain is kind of stuck in the norm, the kind of everyday reality and the fears and the existing paradigms about what's possible. It was the first time I realized that at every moment, we all have the opportunity to stay within the current norms and realities and sort of limitations of what's happening in the moment, or we have the chance to step back and get risky and get courageous in our thinking and set up the conditions internally for an epiphany to happen. So I started to realize that epiphanies and aha moments and true innovation is not magic at all. It's really practical. It's about setting up the conditions to have those epiphanies. So I figured out how to start engineering epiphanies in my life. I learned how to be a conscious innovator. And from there, I went on to become a designer of interactive exhibits for museums with a museum exhibit designer who was incredible. And we designed things that had never been made before. I directed an environmental organization and really transformed some of their programs. I made interdisciplinary artworks that straddled education and technology and crowdsourced creativity, poetry, visual art. I just really started busting things open in my life and really have been ever since. So in my own business, I really fan the flames of that kind of thinking in my clients. And I really go to the deep places about our relationship to the life of our minds and our creative processes, whether we call them that or not, whether we call ourselves creative people or not. I offer this truly kick-ass kind of mindset work there so that my clients can also stand back and have epiphanies and notice that it's not magic, that it's actually how we're built to think. We're built to be innovative, fresh thinkers, wildly innovative, fresh thinkers. We're built to be extremely imaginative every day. And the only reason why we don't feel that way most of the day long has to do with where we've been hurt, right? Where we've been limited, where we've been conditioned and trained not to be that way. If everybody was that way, can you imagine how fast we would change the world? Oh my God. So yeah, epiphanies are made of hard work and support and liberation, like emotional, social, cultural liberation. They're made of integrating creative methods and brainstorming techniques and ways of thinking into your daily life. When that happens, boy, we get clear about our businesses. We get clear about what we want. We get super attuned as listeners to our clients and what they want. And we think of solutions that are completely breaking away from the pack. We think of things that are truly fresh, new offerings for the world. And I think that's what most of us want. Like, why do something if you aren't going to be a luminary in the thing that you're doing, at least in your own mind? If you're not going to get to live the life of a luminary, someone who is just breaking new ground and in that state of inspiration at all times. When you're in that state, your potential clients feel it and they flock to you. So I tell you all this to let you know that you too are a limitless innovator, limitlessly creative, limitlessly brilliant. And at any moment when you're feeling kind of stuck in what is, and what can be feels very limited by what is, it's possible to step way back. Maybe have a good cry like I had to do that whole weekend and reevaluate the situation on very different terms. And this is the work that I have committed my life to, creative liberation work for all. And I would love to do this with you. I, as a creative liberationist, don't come into your business and have all the creative thoughts for you. I back you to be that person in your business, to be the true artist in residence of your business. And thank you for listening to a little piece of my own story. My coach will be happy. I told some of my own story and why it is that I have chosen this work and why I'm qualified to bring it to you. All right. Thank you, loves.